C-Suite Edge. I'm your host, John Light, founder and CEO of Sabretooth Recruiting, and today I have a second-time guest, Rouzbeh Rotabi from Colo.io. Rouzbeh, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, John, great to see you again. Thanks for having me. Good to run it back.
Well, it is, and I think a lot has happened. A lot of water's gone under the bridge from 8 months ago now. I know that you've evolved from where you were doing a lot of fractional work to where you became full-time in a company that you helped found there at Colo. Maybe you could take us a little bit on your journey of what's happened these past few months with you, with Colo, with the marketplace, and we can take it from there.
Great. One, I would love to have been a founder, but I was not. But I've known the founders for 20 years. So I was brought in. I've known the founders for 20 years. I was brought in as a fractional. I've known Patricia Montesi, who's the CEO. We actually started in payments on the very same day at a company called Wildcard Systems back in 2003. She was in account management. I was in business development. We always saw eye to eye about the landscape of how to lead, how to build a business, and really how to work together. The other founders were also there at the time at Wildcard. We built that business up and sold it. But we all stayed in touch and have built a very unique business with them founding it in 2019 and me joining in 23 as a fractional. And I think where you're going with this is like, why did I decide to join full time? Very rarely do you get to join a company that's truly making a difference in the ecosystem that you're in by providing, what we say 4 Delta better technology. And it's because of the legacy systems that are in place, the terminal velocity that is being reached by banks, B2B companies, and payments and fintechs. We believe that there's a better way for folks to advance into the next foray of what payments, banking, core banking, and infrastructure should look like.
It's interesting to me because when I look at you and I look at Colo and what you guys are doing, it has that feel of something that's going to get much bigger. If that makes sense. Sometimes you look at something and you're like, I don't think that's going to make an impact. But look what you all are doing. And I've talked to Patricia. We've recorded a podcast after our first time around. And, she gave me the sense of like, this is just getting off the launching pad, relative to where it's going to end up, where it's going to go over time. I'm curious, what are you all seeing in the market today? Because a lot of people are looking around, especially places like banking, financial services, insurance, that whole general sector, and they're going, man, AI is just going to step in there and wipe the slate clean and change everything. But, there's so much legacy technology and investment. I think part of the headwinds you have to fight against as you swim upstream, so to speak, is that's there. And these things are anchored with billions of dollars and decades of involvement. I mean, how's the market receiving this 4 Delta technological advantage you bring to the table?
Great question. And I'll get to the answer in a second, but I think what's happening, we know what's happening in the banking industry is that they're all left at a decision point currently right now. And the reason is that they've built systems in the 60s and 70s when they started building core banking infrastructure. Mm-hmm. If you think about what was created then, there was no personal computer. There was no mobile app. There was obviously no cell phone and mobile app. There wasn't even a desktop version of their banking. You would go to the teller. If you had a business, your treasurer, your controller, or if you were a sole prop and you owned a coffee shop, you would go to your bank and interact with them on a weekly basis. You would deposit checks, you would have cash management if you had a cash business, come in with armed guards, take your money away and put it in. So if you have that type of foundation of what I'll call, person-to-person infrastructure, it really transcends, if you think about what's happened in the last 25 years even. In 2000, we were just going through Y2K, and what was the bank's biggest question then? How do I adapt to Y2K? I'm old enough to remember that there was rumors that there wasn't going to be able to get money out of the ATMs. Yep. Everyone was going to withdraw their money. I worked at a company called ADP, the world's largest payroll company, and we were able to leverage that and get a lot of people to modernize their payroll systems away from handheld GL and manual checks. So if you think about the lineage of what was built then, and then you add on the advent of the internet and home banking, there's 2 different paths. There's consumer banking where I need to do my checking, my savings, and then there's commercial banking, which is a lot more complex. You have rows and rows of people at bigger companies that do everything from treasury management to reconciliation, all the way down to the fundamental experiences of like check recon. That was all human to human through a system of the core banking technology through some green screen with a DOS interface. Let's fast forward to 25 years. Now we have mobile devices. Now you have treasurers wanting one system of record to check their liquidity. That if I have 5 different bank accounts across 5 major institutions, I want a dashboard that shows where all my money is. I'm trying to move money across every border and across every piece of the business that's possible. And some of these banks, top 5 banks operate in 100 currencies. They have to translate that to different solutions. So I think what's happening now is that the old legacy technology has reached terminal velocity because the pace in which the technology is advancing in people's hands doesn't match. So it's almost like, hey, I want to wash my clothes, but I have a tub and I have a hand soaker. Like there's people trying to buy too many clothes and changing that out on a day-to-day basis, that the hand soaker like you had in the 20s and 30s doesn't work anymore. The line drying doesn't work anymore. So the speed and efficiency is not meeting one another. How that plays into Colo's hands and why we're 4 deltas better is we're coming in and we're creating an extension of the bank's core systems by not having them to replace a Hogan or a Jack Henry or a DXC. Or an FIS, we're additive to them. We can go build on top of that and say your core has reached terminal velocity, and we want to build the business on top of that through APIs, through data feeds, and through UX UI that the legacy players haven't been in the space of. So for us, we're talking to a myriad of top 100 banks. I won't disclose them here. We have customers like Huntington Bank and KeyBank, and we'll be bringing 3 more on here shortly. And we also have a B2B channel that's growing, at a plus 70% clip year over year. So there's people thirsting for the modernization of their banking technology. And then in the B2B and the fintech space, they only know how to operate in an API environment. If you're an engineer and you graduated in 2014, you've only worked in an API environment.
Right.
You never set up mainframes. You've never set up data centers. You've set up everything in the cloud. So being able to counterbalance that, being able to modernize the payment stack and the core banking without heart transplant and hip removal, and building our solution in a way that the end consumer or the end commercial customer can use it, that's what's helping us become 4 deltas better.
Man,
Do we have competition? Absolutely. Is our competition something that we keep an eye on? Yes, but we play our game and we run our own plays.
Well, and I mean, you have to be true to yourself, right? And your mission, your vision, what you see where this is going to end up over time, the journey it's going to go on, and you have to be able to pivot. And sometimes you have to be able to double down. You got to really believe in your strategy. And the thing of it is, one of the things I liked about the first conversation with you and the conversation with Patricia is just the level of domain knowledge that you have there in the Colo team is ridiculous. Like ridiculously high, ridiculously deep, ridiculously good. And, if y'all were a search company, we might be having a different conversation. I say, hey, man.
Yeah, expertise goes a long way, right? If you know what to watch out for and you're willing to look at the old and build the new and not have too much dogma and think about architecture and technology in a new way, that'll help you, whether you're selling what we're doing, whether what OpenAI is doing with what they're doing in the AI space and revolutionizing search. Before it was like, hey, Google, get me the top 10 places to visit in Europe. Now you can go into ChatGPT or even Gemini or whatever and say, I need a 10-day itinerary. I'm landing here. I'm departing here. I have 2 kids. I'm trying to build an itinerary. Here's my budget. It will whiz bang you like everything out, and then you curtail it from there. I just did that. So now that's a consumer product. But what's a treasurer thinking about every day? What's his SVP of corporate deposits? What's a CPO or a founder at a fintech thinking about? What's someone at a company like Bill.com thinking about how to modernize their payment stack? That's kind of the way we look at it.
Yeah, and it's still, even with AI helping us make decisions, it's doing exactly that. It's helping us make those decisions. Yes. We still need to be the makers of those decisions. And I find it intriguing. You look at something like banking, and the fact is we take it for granted. All the stuff that you described that goes on in the background. it's like when you go to the grocery store, you take it for granted that you slide over a scanner and it's going to scan something in. You don't see all the other stuff behind it.
Yep.
And I've had this conversation a number of times where we talk about there's an event in Houston, not related to banking, but I think it's relevant in the sense that it's called the Offshore Technology Conference. And they talk about all the technology, all the forward-looking things that are happening in offshore development, EPC, and all this sort of stuff. And you get a real sense for just the layers upon layers upon layers of technology. And technology, some of it which has been frankly squeezed out. It hit its terminal velocity, it's gone. But look what it gave birth to, And I find that necessity and domain knowledge combined with technology is a pretty attractive space to play in right now. I think it's a real gold rush, and I think there are tremendous opportunities for what companies like Colo are doing. I'm curious to know, as you continue to grow and to build, what do you see happening in the marketplace over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, great question. I want to go back to what you take for granted. Having worked at ADP, which is, again, a payroll company, I'd love to know from you and from the listeners, when you get payroll and money ends up in your account, how many people go by the payroll department and say thank you?
Nobody. Not anymore.
Right. But now think about the complexity. If you run a 100-employee company that has different levels of employees, you have a subset of executives, you have a subset of commission people, you have a subset of hourly people because you have a call center, you have a subset of this. Think about what the payroll department, the humans, forget about AI, they have to run and administer. They have to know how much each person's paid. They have to know each person's compensation rate, commission plan, controller, finance, etc. And then here's the kicker for you. All of that is done by a team of people. From a banking standpoint, that process starts on Tuesday or Wednesday for most companies. The employees don't get paid until Friday. So you're telling me that the technology and the banking rails can't move it immediately. In some cases they can, but not usually. You work at a big company, my wife happens to work at a very large medical device company with 6,000, 7,000 employees. They start the process on Monday afternoon and they get paid on Thursdays. We take that for granted. The banking infrastructure can't move that money any faster. The CFO or the SVP of payroll and HR could not run that payroll on Wednesday and pay people on Thursday because the terminal velocity, again, of the banking rail of ACH is 48 hours. So how do we improve that? We come up with better ways. We come up with more systematic approach of is there a way to pay the hourly people with products like EWA and payroll? Is there a way to do gig payments for people to give them out? Is there a way to do distributions for commission people on the fly, like you get it paid, and is there a way to zap it over a direct debit rail that Visa and MasterCard run? So it's about thinking differently, and that's what people are going to do. In the next 3 to 5 years, if you just go back 5 years ago, we were in a pandemic. The government was distributing billions and billions and trillions of dollars to agencies, states, and so forth. They needed companies like Colo. They needed payments infrastructure companies to distribute the $3 billion, the $4 billion. They needed people like Cash App to partner with Fiserv to go pull their government disbursements down into a personal wallet. So I think the demand and the immediacy of our day-to-day lives is changing the infrastructure. And this is where I have a saying, user input is changing technology infrastructure. A treasurer at a $100 million company needs to know where his or her $50 million on deposits sit. I have 25 at Chase. I have 25 at KeyBank. What's my balance? How much outstanding do I have with each one? So I think in the next 3 to 5 years, people will take less things for granted. The end user, whether that's a commercial corporate controller, or EVP of finance, or an end consumer with a bank account, will demand better. The lifestyle has changed. Just like we don't see, we don't see tape decks anymore. Everyone streams. Cars don't even come with CD players anymore because the experience has changed. The legacy automobile manufacturers have told their internal design people, don't create a CD player.
Yeah. Well, which I was very sad about at first. Losing, I can't do much with them now because I use them for frisbees. But, I see a parallel. I want to circle back to something you said. These processes that banks are using today were developed back in the 60s. I've got part of my thesis in my space in talent acquisition is that the recruiting process we were using in the 80s and even the 70s still what's being used today. And people
Yes.
have wrapped technology around it with the idea, oh, it's going to make it better. And all it succeeds in doing is increasing the volume and speeding it up a bit. You still get similar results. You can work around the edges for improvement, but it's not wholesale improvement unless you rethink what's possible and approach it with a mindset that, man, there's a better way to accomplish this. It's faster, more efficient, more accurate. And I feel like there's a bit of a parallel there because we have our own challenges getting clients to come off of where they've invested decades of training in systems and processes and everything else versus can we talk about what's not just possible with what's within reach to make things better. And it may mean that we got to change the process. We got to approach the infrastructure, the whole front to end, front to back end differently. Like you said, the users, the beneficiaries, they're making demands with their lifestyle changes and choices. How do we respond to it? I think that right there, that could be a very long podcast just by itself.
Well, I'll give you a couple examples of that pointed out. One of my favorite ever. The reason I got into financial services is we moved to America from Iran. My dad was a successful engineer, sold his business, and came here and worked for CF Braun. We couldn't buy a home for the first 3 years. So we lived with my grandparents for a year. We rented an apartment for 2 years. My dad got credit, and we moved in. That's why I've always been intrigued, and I'm an accountant by trade. I was an accountant out of college, so I've always been a numbers person. My English reading is fine, but sometimes I struggle with the sentence structure just because I wasn't trained in it when I was raised. But if you think about just that lineage of like why I was interested in it, now let's think about big things that changed. In the mid '90s, Visa and Bank of America said, "Hey, why don't we create something called the Visa debit card, where we can actually give people access to their checking account dollars through a carded device?" I was in college at the time. It was a good thing and a bad thing because we weren't running up our credit card bills and we weren't getting 29% interest rates. But at the same time, it was like money coming out of your account and it was easier to spend. So think about that was the first version of mobile payments, in my opinion. It was mobile in a matter that you could access an account outside of a credit card to your debit card and put it on a card and open a bar tab, pay for a meal, buy a shirt, buy something take your car in for servicing. That user experience changed everything because cards became every day in our wallet. People always used credit cards as a reserve fund. Now I'm using my debit card on a daily balance, and then came all the co-brand credit cards. So that impetus to move people into a carded device was the first foray of pushing the boundaries further. So then you went into mobile, and then you had P2P with PayPal and Venmo and Cash App. And now you literally have push to card where I can send someone money immediately through Zelle, which just moved through $1 trillion in annual payments volume that people are sending across a banking ecosystem. Now, that's all fine and dandy if the app works on your phone. But that has to hit a ledger. That has to hit a bank account. The bank has to reconcile that with the federal wire or rail or whatever it may be. And all of those things happen. So if you think about the experience and how things change, it's these types of moments that really shift the dynamic of what the end user expects. No one expects to go to the car lot and get a stick shift. No one expects to get a card from a bank linked to their checking account that doesn't have a flag or from one of the networks to go drop, like MasterCard, to go drop it in. So I think we have to think about the big pillars of what's moved. You've got more devices in people's hands. You've got more connectivity. You have a ton more optionality, and you have to meet the customer where they're at, whether it's a human, $100 million company, or a $4 trillion company like NVIDIA. Imagine being there. So that's where I think the shift and the paradigm has happened, and my personal interest in why it's super intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. Rouzbeh, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, learn more, talk about Colo, where things are going, what's the best way for them to make that happen?
Reach out to us. It's colo.io, real simple. We just redid the website earlier this year. We're constantly iterating on it. We're around. Hit me up on LinkedIn. You'll find me under the Colo employee. And then, obviously you can click on the link in this podcast, reach out to John, reach out to me, but we'd love to chat with people. We have a big story to tell. We're talking to top 100 banks. We're talking to top 50 fintechs. And I think there's a market for what we're delivering because of the feedback we've received.
Awesome. Rouzbeh, thanks so much for joining me again.
Thank you, John, for having me.